Navy Federal has a mission to put its members first by making their financial goals the priority. Receive a lifetime of membership benefits to help you and your family accomplish your life missions, like a full suite of financial products designed to fit your needs, 24/7 live support, and access to over 300 branches on or near military bases. Visit NavyFederal.org for more information or call 1-888-842-6328 or download the Navy Federal Credit Union app. Message and data rates may apply.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt. Joining me, as always, over there in beautiful New York City, my man, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
Ty, like Ed Orgeron, I am tired. I feel disheartened at certain things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I'm resolute and inexplicably still covered in Gatorade.
We're a little bit tired, Dan, are we not? It was a late night, not just
Correct.
because of the, in my case, Notre Dame game, the Notre Dame win over USC, which we'll get into, and winding down from that game.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, I get back to the house because I watched with Mama H and Solid Wife and lay down in bed, ready to turn in for the evening. Another successful day of college football, week 13. By the way,
borderline erotic. Borderline erotic.
been a while since I played that sound, but
Yes.
as we kind of get towards the end of November here, and particularly on Thanksgiving weekend, need to play it. Anyway, I'm laying in bed, ready to turn in for the night. Another successful college football weekend.
Yep.
And then I look at my phone, and I look at Twitter coming alive at the prospect of septuple overtime. That's 7 overtimes in the LSU Texas A&M game. A&M eventually did end up winning that football game 74-72. We'll get into that as well, but a little bit of a later night for us old goats here.
It was indeed, Ty. It was indeed. I think we are better for the wear. I don't think we're worse for the wear, but we've got a lot to run down. And luckily, I was fortifying my brain with 4 days, 3.5 days of college football weirdness. So I am strengthened and I'm ready.
You are correct. Why don't we start here where we always do on a Sunday? Let's get into your week 13, your rivalry week, your Thanksgiving Day week. Reverbs, have a listen.
Jim. I'm not mad, Jim. I'm just disappointed.
Hey, this is Fred calling from the Horseshoe.
Hi, this is Adrienne from New York City.
Hey everyone, Verballers World at Large, Alex from Shanghai calling.
Howdy, this is Sarah from Houston.
Listen, Jim Harbaugh is a dork, and he will never, ever beat Ohio State.
What was your favorite Michigan run up the middle for no gain?
Summarizing Urban Meyer's press conference, it takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. Ha ha ha! Go Bucks!
Hi, I'm a Michigan State fan. Okay, I'm gonna hang up now.
As a Hawkeye fan living in Lincoln, Nebraska, I just want to take some time to reflect on this. Nebraska finishes 4-8. God, that feels good to say that.
This is Michael in Madison. Let it be known that nobody beats Minnesota 16 times in a row. We dropped that off!
And it looks like for the second year in a row, unlike Indiana, Purdue's going to be able to save the date for a bowl game.
If you took the under in the OU West Virginia game, number one, what were you thinking? And number two, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And I'd like to report the entire West Virginia offense in a losing effort.
Do you think that the Longhorn defense knows that there's 4 quarters in a football game? Do you think they know that?
There's white stuff on the Palouse.
At any moment, the Yeti will walk onto the field of the Washington State game because it's beginning to look more and more like his natural habitat.
It was a rough night for Washington State. Not only did they eliminate themselves from playoff contention this year, but they disqualified themselves from participation in the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, and Miles Gaskin looks so delightful.
408 in the West Coast, and the location of the Territorial Cup is still in Tempe, Arizona.
Utah Utes offense is why I have trust issues.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish have pulled off a victory in the last possible second, as I was afraid this game would go. But congratulations to USC for playing a hell of a ball game.
And that game might have been garbage, but holy, Notre Dame is going to the playoffs, and I don't know what to do with my hands.
I can't believe it. My Hokies stole one from the Wahoos. Good grief, what a game.
I don't even know what it's going to take to get the Commonwealth back in Charlottesville anymore. They're the better team. Everything's in their favor, and they still find a way to lose.
Hey, Dan and Ty, you guys are great. Auburn sucks. Roll Tide.
I'd like to report a crime. I'm here between the hedges, and someone just got murdered.
You know it's rivalry week. You can throw out those records and throw out those players in the Egg Bowl because, wow, there was a fight.
And my Aggies are about to go into 7th overtime. And, man, I really want to win and beat those Tigers. But I really just want to go to bed.
Ah! It's over! It's finally over after 7 overtimes!
Thank God. After the 7 overtime game in College Station, I'm very grateful for college football.
Just left Kyle Field, and I don't smoke, but I need me a cigarette after that.
Your 2018 LSU Tigers just played in the highest scoring game in FBS history. So there's that.
Just calling to find out how to mark myself safe on Facebook after surviving this Texas A&M LSU game.
All righty, there you go. A lot of messages.
Yes.
Came through last night. Hats off to our boy Taylor down there in D.C. doing yeoman's work, cutting all those up, mashing them together into our fine segment that we like to call the Reverbs. Again, thank you for calling in 408 Verbal 1. The line will be open next weekend as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get through or don't want to call in, you can always find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, all the usual hotspots. Just send us an email, solidverbal@gmail.com. Dan, okay.
A lot of umami this week with those reverbs. That indescribable fifth flavor, Ty.
That's right. So here is the state of affairs through 13 weeks of the season. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame all won.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, number 4, lost in blowout fashion, which we'll start with here. LSU, I mentioned the overtime loss. And also Wazoo, who was 8. They lost in the Apple Cup. UCF won. They were 9th, but they lost Mackenzie Milton to a really bad knee injury. Hopefully he recovers quickly from that.
Ugh.
And then everyone else in the top 10 won, which means Georgia probably moves up to 4th. Oklahoma probably to 5th. And I would assume Ohio State now to number 6. So we can get into how all of that works together here as it relates to the playoff as we go through all of our recaps. But a couple teams, 3 to be exact, in the top 10 all go down in rivalry week.
Yes, and if nothing else, this week really did stamp the fact that there is no real upper middle class in college football this year. We've got the top of the top, and then we've got pretty good. But looking at Florida's going to be a top 10 team. Texas is going to be borderline top 10. Kentucky's going to be borderline top 10. There's a gap. This was the gap year, Ty.
This was the gap year. Let's start though with the game.
Guess who just got murdered?
Ohio State 62, Michigan 39. The only good news for Michigan.
Oh, I'm ready for this.
Desmond Howard moved them up to 2nd in his polls.
What?
You heard Desmond Howard's argument on game day.
Well, this was before the game.
Before the game.
Yeah.
I was telling a joke, Dan.
Yeah, you nailed it. You got me. I thought he did it after the fact, where it's Ohio State 1, Michigan 2.
I mean,
These are the real team.
I heard his argument on game day yesterday. It's not beyond the realm of possibility.
I honestly didn't. What did he say?
He made the same argument you did about Michigan potentially jumping Notre Dame, but he did a much poorer job of it.
I would like to recant upon further review. my stance that Michigan should be ahead of Notre Dame.
Here is the bad news for Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the fact that they lost and gave up 62 points and 567 yards, they're now 0-4 in the Jim Harbaugh era against Ohio State. So I know we make a parody of the does X have a Y problem. Right. You probably could make a decent case at this point that Michigan does have a legit Ohio State problem.
I mean, they have probably deeper problems than that, which is very strange to say. And we can talk about this game specifically within the context of that statement that I just made. But Michigan had a very good year.
Yeah, they did.
Michigan had a very, very good year. And if you haven't read the piece, and I speak to you and I speak to anybody listening by, I think it's Mike Rosenberg at SI, about, Michigan looking inward, that they have done plenty to have entirely successful years in the Big Ten. They finished the season going, 10-2, with a lot of dominating victories over conference opponents. But they have their season bookended against Notre Dame and Ohio State, which, to be clear, these are playoff caliber teams that Michigan is not on a level to hang, generate points consistently, and adjust defensively against the very best. And that appears to be the Michigan Wolverine bar historically, competing against the very best, competing against Ohio State, who they have not beaten in now, 7 years, and they've lost 14 of 15. So Michigan is at this weird inflection point where they need to figure out how to go from very good to great, because this is a conversation we had after Notre Dame. They looked better after Notre Dame, but after yesterday, and to me, the story is still very much Ohio State's dominance rather than Michigan's lack thereof.
Agreed.
But Michigan-wise, it's that conversation that needs to happen internally, because they looked on both sides of the field stubborn in struggling to keep up with what we saw to be capital G great Ohio State, which we have not seen terribly often this year.
We have not, no.
But when Ohio State is playing on that level where they're getting the ball to speed, where they are trusting Dwayne Haskins and making him comfortable and defensively attacking and making plays in the open field, this is a team that, once again, looks to be playoff caliber and ready to be shut out in the playoffs.
Dwayne Haskins.
That was mean, but
that was funny.
I do credit Ohio State because they looked excellent in every phase, including special teams. Chris Olave, I believe,
yes,
was the one who has worked his way into the receiver rotation. Also had that punt block that went for a touchdown early on that really opened the game up for the Buckeyes. You can't say enough good things about the degree to which Ohio State pulverized whatever setting you prefer on a blender, Ty.
Right. Well, so Dwayne Haskins, by the way, 318 through the air, 5 touchdowns. He sets a Big Ten record for passing touchdowns in a season with 41. So,
by the way, Drew Brees, 39 in 13 games. So Dwayne Haskins actually did it quicker.
Yeah, I mean, Dwayne Haskins, how quickly we forget that this was his first full season as a starting quarterback. So clearly they've caught some lightning in a bottle here with him. We saw flashes of it last year in spots when he would come in. But Haskins has had an incredible season. Ohio State's real liability at this point is their defense. But nonetheless, 62-39, they take it to Michigan. They are now headed to the Big Ten championship game next week. They will square off against the Northwestern Wildcats, who won 24-16 over Illinois.
Yep.
Isaiah Bowser had another good game on the ground, 18 carries, 166 yards. I am very curious to see how that game plays out. With the way that Ohio State has looked on offense, I think the natural assumption is that they'd go out there and they'd blow the doors off Northwestern. But what we've seen from Northwestern time and time again is these games where it looks like they're overmatched. They just don't end up being overmatched. They find a way to keep the game close. And at least as of now, I haven't seen a spread or anything yet because it's early on a Sunday. My assumption would be that they'd find a way to keep that one close.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And a terrific season from Northwestern, who clinched the West a couple weeks ago now. And I mean, we're not going to belabor anything with the Illinois game, but I think that's right. Northwestern has come to play against the best teams on their schedule, and not necessarily Akron, but against playoff caliber teams in Notre Dame and less so Michigan. Northwestern has made plays consistently, especially on defense.
So there you go. There's your Big Ten championship, the way it is setting up. Ohio State against Northwestern. Michigan had a shot. They had a shot. They had to win 2 games. They could have made it to the playoff. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed that they didn't. I know we make fun of Michigan here and there, but a good season. I really wish it would have worked out for them.
It'll be a serious. It's Taylor Twellman who had the rant after U.S. national team. What are we even doing?
Yeah.
That will be the offseason for Michigan. Depending on what happens with the bowl game, and they could still go to the Rose Bowl and win the Rose Bowl and go 11-2. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Great season.
But these past 24, 48 hours, whatever, in this week will be, what are we even doing for Michigan fans?
Oklahoma 59, West Virginia 56. West
Friday?
Virginia on Friday. West Virginia had over 700 total yards and lost. As you can tell from the final score, as you can tell from just West Virginia's yard total, Oklahoma didn't bring a whole lot to the table in terms of defense. But they did score 2 defensive touchdowns, which were absolutely enormous in this game. I was thinking about this all weekend. The one playoff matchup outside of, my team, Notre Dame, and whoever they have to play, but the one playoff matchup that hypothetically could happen that intrigues me to no end is Oklahoma against Alabama.
Of course.
I feel like I turned a corner with this Oklahoma defense. Now, they're not good.
No, they're aggressively not good. Yeah.
We're under no illusions here that the Oklahoma defense is any good. But when you change the framing of that point a little bit, if we treat their lack of defense as more of a stylistic decision and less of a real deficiency, it's a lot easier to just manage that mentally. And all of a sudden it shifts from, wow, Oklahoma's defense really stinks to, oh, Oklahoma, they don't play defense. That's just how they win football games.
Right.
That is how they won this football game. 59-56, a ton of points, a lot of fun, almost annoyingly offensive in this football game. Like there was just no defense whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I obviously, and I was tweeting about this, come down on the side of I much prefer this at least to the hopelessness that is 9-6 football. That's my personal decision. To me, college football is largely a TV sport living in New York. So that's the lens through which I view it. And listen, Oklahoma, I'm so sorry. Listen. Oklahoma plays a defense not unlike what a lot of teams who are actually incredibly successful on offense are forced into doing because they score, such a big problem to have, too quickly.
Right.
And that defense has to stay on the field a long time. Oklahoma plays a wait for it defense where they just have to figure out some spots where they have to take chances, go for turnovers, blitz all out, or, jump routes to try to force turnovers and flip the course of the game. It worked against West Virginia. It hasn't worked so well in past games, but they've still managed to pull out all but the Texas game, which they also almost pulled out against West Virginia specifically. West Virginia didn't make those wait for it plays, and Oklahoma did. And I also would point to the huge, I think it was 4th and 5, I want to say. Oklahoma decides to go for it. West Virginia rushes how many? They rush 3. They rush 3. Kyler Murray buys himself enough time and basically ices the game in that moment. But to me, an incredible watch for most of this. I would have preferred 45-42 instead of 59-56.
Give us a little bit of defense.
Just a little bit more. Just West Virginia coming up with a pick six, something like that to really stem everything. But ultimately, it's been a crazy pleasure watching Kyler Murray, Will Grier, their assortment of receivers and running backs all season long. And the game delivered what it sort of promised to do.
Just getting back to my earlier point, Oklahoma might need to score 80 if they play Alabama. They wouldn't score 80, but in order to win that game, they might have to. I just think it's such an interesting clash of styles. And very clearly the best offense in college football, Oklahoma, up against an Alabama team, a defending national champion. Again, this is all hypothetical, but I think that's the matchup that I would be most interested in watching.
But look at the defenses they're playing, Paul. Yes, that would be crazy interesting because of the mind of Lincoln Riley against Nick Saban's defense. And I don't believe Oklahoma's receivers are all that big, which has been part of the formula to competing with Alabama. But
no,
this is what 2018 has done to stop Hollywood Brown. Not much.
Nope, not much. Okay, Oklahoma is going to get a chance to avenge their earlier loss to Texas when they play next week in the Big 12 championship. Meanwhile, West Virginia, they finish 8-3. They had a game against NC State earlier in the year. You might remember that was canceled due to weather. So they are effectively done at 8-3. A good year for the Mountaineers, but just couldn't get over the hump here. Ran into a buzzsaw against Oklahoma.
Correct.
Texas, by the way, did win their game against Kansas. Now, the final score was 24-17. You look at that, and at first blush, you're like, wow.
Held on.
Whoa, what's that about? Kansas scored all 17 of their points in the fourth quarter. So Texas had the Jayhawks at arm's length for a good chunk of this football game. You look at the box score, nothing jumps out at you. Statistically, not a whole lot to report here. I think we expected as much, but Texas does formally knock off the Jayhawks 24-17.
Yeah, the takeaways to me, Sam Ehlinger's shoulder does not look anywhere near 100% and a little sloppy and careless with the ball, which he has not been basically since the Maryland loss to open the season. I don't know how much of a concern that is against Oklahoma's defense, but when Texas is at its best, it's Sam Ehlinger doing nothing but willing this team and making plays to get them in the win column. I'm concerned about Texas's ability to close, which has been the concern all season long, and they managed to barely hold on against Oklahoma. We'll see if that formula stays intact in, I believe, the game's at Jerry World in Arlington.
Texas, Oklahoma, Red River Shootout Part 2. We'll decide the Big 12. Let's move over to the SEC. Alabama, 52, Auburn 21. This game, Dan, it was just 17-14 at half. Auburn looking a little frisky, I thought, in the first half. But then Alabama outscored Auburn 35-7 in the second half. They were led, of course, by Tua Tagovailoa. I did listen to some of this game on the Auburn radio network where he is still Tagovailoa.
Okay, well.
Another media outlet that didn't get the memo, but nonetheless, Tua throws for 324, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, was responsible for 6 touchdowns in total, which was a school record. In the second half in particular, Tua was 11 for 12 for 208 yards and 4 touchdowns. Alabama really turned on the Jets when they had to. They gave Auburn a half, but then just in the second half, they pulled away in style, a bunch of big time throws from Tua, longer touchdown throws that asserted Alabama's dominance here as they complete their perfect regular season. And now we'll move on to the SEC title game.
If there was any one play that was that small microcosm for this game, it was when Auburn went for, I believe, a fake punt, and Patrick Surtain Jr., the freshman corner for Alabama, stopped it just a yard short with no momentum on Auburn's side. It was impressive to watch Alabama open up this game. Tua was in no shocker at all. Outstanding. 6 total touchdowns. Auburn was sort of, I don't want to say they were junk balling their way to a close game in the first half, but it was end arounds, it was trick plays, and if that's what you need, it's just, that's hard to sustain against Alabama for 4 quarters. I don't know who wins the Heisman. I just know there is no quarterback more excellent than what Tua looks like at his best. That's just sort of a reality. I thought Alabama did a marvelous job adjusting in the second half.
Alabama, again, 12-0. Auburn, 7-5. Kind of a disappointing year for Auburn, the way they started out. I thought gave us a little bit more promise about the direction of this season. But the offense never really came together the way they hoped. And, you know, you run into a team like Alabama, it's tough to win the Iron Bowl here. They finished again 7-5. Alabama will square off against Georgia in the SEC title game. It's going to be a rematch of last year's national title game, which went to overtime. Look, we talk a lot about Georgia and how they sous vide their opponents.
Yeah.
This game against Georgia Tech, the clean old-fashioned hate game, was like deep frying a turkey, but not like the correct way when you completely thaw the turkey out. They just dropped them in the oil. They were frozen, and you had the flames shooting out, like the ones that start fires and stuff. That was what happened in this game because it was over at halftime. I think Georgia led 35-7, something like that. They eventually go on to win 45-21. Just a thorough dress down of Georgia Tech.
Correct. The score is not indicative of the level of dominance that Georgia exhibited. They ran all over them. Jake Fromm was outstanding throwing all over them. Justin Fields comes in and takes the lion's share of work in the second half. And Georgia wins in Athens for the first time since 2012 against Tech. And are looking out to defend their SEC title against Alabama. So rematch of the national championship game, and congratulations to Alabama for winning the SEC West for a record 1 straight years, Ty. 1 straight years. No, it's going to be a great game.
If you didn't watch the Georgia Tech game, the only stat that you need to know, the stat that tells you everything about what happened in this game, knowing that Texas option team, Georgia Tech rushed 46 times for just 128 yards. That is 2.8 yards per carry. They had just 219 in total. When the ground game is that ineffective for the Yellow Jackets, you sort of know the end result. You don't even need to see the score. You know the way that things are going to go. So again, 45-21, your final. It's going to be Georgia and Alabama in the SEC title game.
Yeah, and a Georgia front that has struggled at times against the run this year. Game planned very nicely against Tech.
All right, Dan, let's move over, if we could, to the ACC. We had the Palmetto Bowl. We had a contest between Clemson and South Carolina. 56-35, your final score here in favor of the Tigers. 91 total points, 1,344 total yards, Dan. Jake Bentley for South Carolina. Get this, 510 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, but in a losing effort.
Yeah.
So I just want to give credit here to South Carolina, because as we mentioned on our Homer show, the Homer show I did anyway, with Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated, so many South Carolina fans were just kind of hopeless headed into this game.
Yeah.
Nobody told the football team. They actually played really, really hard in this one. Again, it's just an instance where they ran into an offensive buzzsaw in Clemson that was virtually unstoppable.
I think that's right. And we pay a lot of attention collectively to Clemson's defensive line, rightfully so. But offensively, this line is experienced, protected Trevor Lawrence all season long, opened up running lanes, another big game for Travis Etienne. And Clemson's offense this season has pretty much been the mark of consistency. I mean, it's just been the example for this kind of offense and working in different types of players. They do it against South Carolina. The big difference is, and we looked at that early on, Kendrick Rogers and Texas A&M succeeding against this Clemson secondary, and maybe like, okay, it's early on. They're getting their feet. It's a tough place to play. Clemson secondary is not looking wonderful.
No.
Against decent quarterbacks this year, there have been issues, and a lot of it can be covered up by a pretty ridiculous pass rush. But Jake Bentley had time. Deebo Samuel got loose a bunch. There were lanes. There was confusion on Clemson's defense. This was, to me, uncharacteristic of a defense that coming into this game, there was a pretty decent argument to be made that they were the best in the country. I don't know that argument can be made, but with a lot of time, I don't think they're going to have trouble with Pitt, but with a lot of time before the playoff, I imagine that's a huge advantage for Brent Venables and his staff to get things sorted out scheme and teaching wise.
It was interesting to watch Clemson win this way, though. You know, like in most of their games, their defense is suffocating you, and then the offense just crockpots you very quietly. Yep. In this one, Clemson got that cast iron skillet nice and hot, and they just seared the crap out of South Carolina the whole game on offense. Trevor Lawrence, 393 through the air. You mentioned Travis Etienne. The only thing that I will point out here, just for South Carolina, on the defensive side of the ball, it does not help how banged up they are on the defensive line. I mean, that really works against you, especially against a good offense like Clemson. But I don't know if that would have changed the equation at all because Clemson is so good with the football. They finished 12-0. They're going to face Pitt in the ACC championship game next week. We'll talk about Pitt momentarily. South Carolina has one more game next week. If they win against Akron, that will get them to 7-5. 7-5.
And a good year, by the way, for South Carolina in terms of, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the game, playing hard, playing with fight. They haven't been comfortably beaten since I think the Georgia game. Really, I mean they've played every game close either way since late September, early October. So playing hard for this staff and encouraging. This set up to be a pretty ideal year to perhaps win more than 7 if they're able to get by Akron. But all things considered, a really good showing. There's no such thing really as a moral victory. But if you're a South Carolina fan, sort of resigned to the fact that they were going to lose to Clemson, you at least have to be encouraged.
Meanwhile, Pitt, Clemson's opponent in next week's ACC championship game, lost 24-3.
Yes, they did.
To Miami. Miami gave up, get this, just 200 yards. They held Pitt to 1 for 15 on third downs. They forced 12 punts, had 6 sacks, and 14 tackles for loss. So clearly a robust defensive showing for the Hurricanes here, their final game of the year.
Yeah, and they've been really good all year long. They've just been let down by an offense. I think coming into this game, they were a top 15 or so S&P Plus defense, and I would, considering the degree of difficulty with how messed up that offense has looked, particularly in second halves of games, unable to adjust and able to get into the end zone, this defense has had more of an uphill battle than most, and came through in a big way, worked in concert with an offense finally, with their offense finally against Pitt, who knows, maybe they're sort of shutting it down creatively ahead of the ACC championship game, but good for Miami for not going into the offseason without at least partially righting the ship after the middle part of their schedule.
Absolutely. So again, Clemson v. Pitt next week. I believe they play that one where Charlotte?
They played in Charlotte. Should also point out, N'Kosi Perry was 6 of 24 in a winning effort.
Okay.
But DJ Dallas and Travis Homer were very, very good.
Let's move over to the Apple Cup. They played it on Friday night. Washington 28, Washington State 15. With this victory now by Washington, I believe it's safe to say that the Pac-12 has officially cannibalized itself. The cannibalization was complete upon conclusion of this football game. A great quote from Jake Browning after it was over. Quote, "I've heard it sucks to lose to the Cougs. I'm glad I didn't have to experience it." Burn.
Wow. Yeah, this is 5 in a row for Chris Peterson over Mike Leach. Is my math correct there? I hope so. Tasting menu. And I guess it ended in ice cream.
It ended in ice cream.
As the Cougs go down in the snow, and it is somewhat easy to say, well, it's snowing, and that really slows down the passing game and the air raid for Gardner Minshew and Washington State. Jake Browning threw the ball pretty well. He
looked pretty good, I thought.
Same snow,
and it snowed hard too.
It did indeed.
I don't want to undersell the snow. It was hard enough and covered enough out there that the production crew had to break out those computer-generated yard markers, which I
love that so much.
I still don't understand how they do it, but I watched it with the solid wife, and she looked over at me and said, "Wait, the players can't see those, can they?" I said, No, it's all white out there.
So they, if you want to get nerdy with it, they do digitally map out the field before the games, and that's how they put the first down yellow marker out there, but they map out the entire field. So there is a digital field overlaid onto the actual field in the production truck. It's pretty neat stuff. Speaking of neat stuff, though, that Washington State offense.
Yeah.
They were shut down. Washington State's defense was all over the place. It was nice to see. I think this is Myles Gaskin's 4th straight year going for 1,000 yards.
Something
That's
like that.
That's pretty great.
He had a really good game. The and I said this on the preview, not to beat my own chest, but I think we both knew it. Washington had an opportunity in this football game to take advantage on the ground. And that's what they did. Myles Gaskin Savon Ahmed, they combined 38 carries, 257 yards. Gaskin had 3 touchdowns. He was the best player on the field in this game.
Sure. And I mean, the return really, I mean, he was hurt most of the year of Hunter Bryant, the Washington tight end, I think opened things up for their offense. And the story to me ultimately is some squandered opportunities for Washington State, but Gardner Minshew just looked completely out of his element, and Washington they were sharp. The Huskies were sharp, which they most certainly have not been this year on the road, but I guess they saved the best for last and take on Utah in Santa Clara. I believe that's the suburb of San Francisco in the Pac-12 championship game. Once again, Washington finds itself there after not playing in the game last year. So good for the Huskies to close it out strong. And did you see the Jimmy Lake quotes? If you're going to talk about quotes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The Washington defensive coordinator.
He was fired up.
He was fired up saying hey, Washington State never changes what they do. This is sort of routine for us. I'm paraphrasing here. And, I heard their head coach is sort of a different kind of guy, but he's not really doing anything different than we would normally see from them every year. Hope he stays there for a long time.
Nice.
Wow. And listen, that's harsh.
Listen.
That is arrogant, and it is all deserved.
It's all very deserved.
Yeah.
Again, Washington wins. They are now headed to the Pac-12 championship game next week against Utah. Wazoo finishes, I think, with a pretty successful 10-2 mark, but obviously didn't get to their final goal. One other point here before moving on to the Holy War. Just want to send our best to the Washington band. Did you see this story?
Super duper scary.
Whoa, man. So they didn't play at the Apple Cup. Right. They didn't play because one of their buses rolled over on the way to the game. 47 people taken to the hospital. Looks like everyone's going to be okay, but scary stuff, man. We send them the best. Hope everyone recovers quickly. That is a scary state of affairs.
Yeah, no serious injuries. I saw the Washington State band learned the UW fight song. Cool gesture and show of appreciation for a pretty, lucky event ultimately that nothing terrible happened. And I don't have much more to add. It was cool to see the outcry. If you've ever driven in the Pacific Northwest when the weather turns, there are some treacherous roads and driving ahead of you.
Okay. Utah wins 35-27. The Utes were down 20-0 at half, and then came back. They outscored BYU by a 35-7 margin in the second half, including 28 unanswered points in the final 16 minutes of the game. Utah looked like crap across the board here. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't move the ball on offense. They basically handed BYU 14 points on special teams, but yet Jason Shelley, the backup quarterback, didn't have a great statistical night, but he was pretty clutch when it counted, had some big plays in the second half. Utah ultimately goes on to come from behind and win 35-27 here to win the Holy War and finish 9-3.
Yeah, and good for Utah. Yes, they totally laid an egg. I didn't watch a ton of this game, but from the chunks I've seen, Jason Shelley, coming in a difficult situation with Huntley going down, having to play a chunk of this season against good teams. He's come through. Zach Moss goes down. Shelley was counted on with his feet as well against BYU, and cool to see Utah finally breaking through and going to their first Pac-12 championship game. And BYU, it's a long ways since that Wisconsin game, but ultimately, listen, BYU's bowl eligible after a pretty disastrous 2017. Not the worst thing in the world.
That is correct. BYU finishes 6-6. So again, your Pac-12 championship game in Santa Clara will be the Washington Huskies against the Utah Utes.
That's Friday night, I believe.
Friday night, correct. Okay, moving on. The nightcap. Nice little backdoor cover.
It was a very nice. USC scoring a second half touchdown was clean.
They're all special. But
I know, there's snowflakes there.
The backdoor cover for USC was a nice little feather in my cap since I always take the points here. Okay, how much of this game did you watch, Dan?
The entire thing, Ty.
How did you feel emotionally about this game?
For maybe even after the game, Ty, I came away thinking, okay, Notre Dame won a clunker, and that's what, really good teams do. because I thought the play calling, especially in the first half, was sort of confusing. Ian Book made some pretty errant looking throws, but they came back a lot stronger in the second half. They looked to be more patient. They looked to not get overly eager on defense as USC was moving the ball. They forced turnovers. I wasn't sure if that, I think it was St. Brown who fumbled it and then sort of recovered it with his knees and had his hands on it, but the video wasn't good enough to overturn the fumble ruling. I thought Notre Dame did a pretty good job. I was worried watching Notre Dame in the first half. I was like, why did they schedule this Syracuse game in Yankee Stadium and give themselves 2 straight far away-ish road games?
I know.
And it almost looked like they were going to be the reason that USC was going to win this game something stupid, 17-14. It worries me about Notre Dame, but not as much as it encourages me about the Irish to win a game like this. They relied on chunk plays. It was the long Dexter Williams. I think it was a run, and then they had a screen later to, was it Tony Jones on a big fourth down?
Yeah, Tony Jones Jr.
So situationally, Notre Dame comes through. I'd be a little bit worried if I were a Notre Dame fan about how flat they looked for a good amount of this game.
They did, but let me...
That's nitpicking.
Let me jump in. So you're right. Everything you're saying is correct. It was not Ian Book's cleanest game by any stretch. He had that really bad interception in the fourth quarter. He airmailed a couple longer throws where he had guys open, but he was big when he had to be. And I'm thinking in particular, a big third down run earlier in the game where the team is flat. The offense feels like the only guy playing is Chris Fink. And Book just drives his helmet through a defender to get the first down. He does stuff like that. There was a run later in the game on third down, and I want to say 12, where it was a ballsy quarterback draw. He goes, he sort of high steps a defender and races across the first down line. He has an it quality to him that I think is going to bode well for Notre Dame if they should find themselves in a situation like this moving forward. So, again, not the greatest or cleanest game for him, but he made big plays when he had to. And he was aided by a defense that progressively figured things out over the course of the game.
For sure.
This is a defense that was on its heels in the first half. JT Daniels was making a lot of quick throws over the middle, the wider screen, stuff like that. Notre Dame could not generate any pressure until like the fourth quarter. But what they did do was create some turnovers. So you mentioned the one fumble, but there was another in the first half that stopped the USC offense from scoring more points. In the second half, USC was held mostly scoreless until their final drive. Punt, turnover on downs, punt, touchdown.
Yeah.
This has been the MO for the Notre Dame defense. When teams
and the USC offense.
And the USC offense, sure.
Yeah.
Both teams entirely on brand. When an offense goes out there and seems to get the best of the Notre Dame defense, Clark Lee is able to make the necessary adjustments to slow down that offense in short order. And so the story has been for Notre Dame, if you want to score, you got to score early because they're going to figure it out. And that was the case here. They eventually did tighten their vice grips a little bit on that USC offense, hold things a bit more in check while the offense got going. I tweeted this out, but this game reminded me a lot of the Pitt game when Pitt blitzed the farm against Notre Dame in the first half and took them out of rhythm. And, obviously USC's got a little bit more firepower and really a game plan in this one on offense compared to Pitt. But all in all, it works out well. Notre Dame finishes 12-0. I believe. Can we play the playoff sound for them?
Please do.
They were being a bit coy on the broadcast. Like, do you think Notre Dame's good enough to make the playoff? If Notre Dame does not make the playoff, there will be holy hell to pay, and they're going to burn the system down. Notre Dame finishes 12-0. I believe with this W, Dan, they are officially the first team to qualify for the 2018-2019 college football playoff.
They absolutely will be in the playoff. There is no question in my mind. I don't know, that they will be a top 2 seed. But they will be in. Clemson looks like, if they're able to get by Pitt, which I imagine they will be, a little more vulnerable to somebody like Ian Book, and the duo of Claypool and Boykin are both big dudes who should be able to physically compete with anybody. really good season for Notre Dame. It's an ideal season for Notre Dame with how that schedule shaped up, with USC and Virginia Tech and Florida State, Stanford all having, probably by their standards, pretty down years, but all Notre Dame can do is beat who's in front of them. And that's what they did. I'm a little more worried about Notre Dame than I was after the Syracuse game, but USC is okay. They're feisty.
Yeah.
Notre Dame finishes the year, though, and this is a credit you mentioned, Clark Lee. I think they've only given up 20 points 4 times. A couple of those was sort of garbage time. They don't give up 30 all season long. So
defense,
if
has
nothing
been
else,
very good. Very good.
Notre
defense.
Dame should 1,000% be able to compete on defense with anybody in the country.
USC, for their part, finishes up at 5-7. They needed this one to get the bowl eligibility. They were flying banners over the stadium. I need to ask you, which of the banners that you tweeted out were real and which were fake?
None of them were real. Okay. I
legitimately didn't know. I'm looking at our Twitter feed thinking, wow, hire Jeff Fisher. Interesting.
Yeah. So I found, like, the internet is it's a good and terrible place. I'm going to go through the fake banners I tweeted. So there's a website, and it's photo something. If you just Google like custom plane banner, there's a website where you just put in text and they'll spit out a pretty realistic looking plane banner flying behind a plane midair, and then you can't tell where it is. It's just sky and clouds. So the first one was, and this all happened because USC fans, or a very small select group of sad USC fans, flew a Lynn Swan, please fire Clay Helton. So then I generated USC, hire Jeff Fisher, exclamation. And then I tweeted out, and I figured people were going to understand. I tweeted out, because I was watching with Richard Johnson. He told me, he's like, you should probably, it looks too realistic, tell people that it's fake. So then I tweeted out a plane carrying a banner that said, easy to make fake banners.
Right.
And nobody caught on.
I didn't catch on.
Okay. So the next one I tweeted out was fire Helton, hire Petros.
Right.
Shout out Petros Papadakis.
Yep.
Really keeping it in the USC family. USC, Norm Chow, question mark? Yeah, question mark. And then I don't even know if I posted that one. I posted USC, Norm Chow's ready. And then I tweeted out USC, Herm would listen. And it was fun. And people believed it, even when I said it was easy to make fake banners. So that's not on me anymore.
I believed it, and I own half of that Twitter account.
That's true. That's very true. Either way, Ty, we're recording this. It's currently 10:22 a.m. Eastern time. Clay Helton's job security is not known to me, at least.
Nope.
My feeling is, if you get rid of him, I don't know who you really. I mean, if you're positive you can hire James Franklin, I get it. I'm not blown away, but I get it.
I don't think that'd be a good move. We could talk about, we could do a whole other podcast on what's a fit, what isn't a fit. But
I would lean towards USC keeping Clay Helton. He won the Pac-12 last year. It was undeniably a down, disappointing year. I imagine he should have the opportunity to overhaul some of his coaching staff because we know his ceiling as a coach, at least with whoever's recruits, some of them his, some of them others, is winning the Pac-12 when he has a really good quarterback like he did last year. I think it's a tough message to send that one down year, again, definitely down, you're gone. I don't know who USC thinks they can get, if it's Jack Del Rio or Jeff Fisher or whoever that is going to want to be in that situation.
Oh man, interesting. 5-7, a disappointing year for USC.
For sure.
But they did lose Sam Darnold.
They did
from a year ago. Like, there was some turnover there. It wasn't as if they entered the season as a top 5 caliber team. So 5-7 is a disappointment. But
it was a mess of a Pac-12. I say that as a fan sort of disappointed in his own Pac-12 team. It was a down Pac-12. It was a year where UCLA was terrible for a good chunk of the year. Arizona and ASU had major issues for stretches. Utah's quarterback gets hurt. And Utah was good, but they were not world-beating good.
No.
And Colorado with a disastrous year. This was a year that USC should have won at least 9 games. And they didn't.
All right, let's move over to the SEC. Texas A&M 74, LSU 72, 7 overtimes. This game was nuts. As we talked about earlier in the show,
Yeah.
LSU thought they won. They dumped the Gatorade on Ed Orgeron. It looked like they had a game-clinching interception in the fourth quarter, but the play was reviewed. Kellen Mond's knee was down. We end up going to overtime. 146 combined points. It's the most in FBS history. Dan.
So you're talking FBS, since the FBS was formed.
That is correct.
I'm pretty sure Georgia Tech won a game like 222-0.
That is correct.
1927 or something. Yes. Incredible game. Ridiculous.
Incredible. 74-72 your final here. LSU goes 9-3 on the year. A&M 8-4. We both talked about watching this game late into the night. It's why you're sipping on coffee. I'm sipping on high caffeine tea here.
Look at you.
But what's your takeaway from a game like this? I didn't know LSU had it in them.
First off, just wanted the game to end. I was very tired. But in terms of the actual football, really well played at the end by Texas A&M. Kellen Mond made the passes, an incredible catch by, God, I don't remember who caught there were so many touchdowns. I think, was it Davis? Was it Kendrick Rogers? Whoever caught the game-tying touchdown to send it to overtime. Great play. I thought the Jay Sternberger ball in overtime was a fumble. I thought he caught it, and it was a fumble. It was ruled incomplete and not reviewed, though when things could have benefited Texas A&M at times, plays were reviewed. I mean, like the clock spike at the end was definitely reviewed to see if they still had a second left. I think LSU had every opportunity to win this game.
Yeah.
I thought the PI was, at the very end, pretty questionable, and I don't know, but they had opportunities. It was, by the end of the game, I was looking for the gif of, remember the episode of The Simpsons where Homer fought Dredrick Tatum? And it was sort of just so exhausted that he could barely lift his arms to throw the weakest punch, and then Dredrick Tatum hits him on the top of his head. That weak, exhausted punch was basically the last 4 overtimes for these defenses. But just a spectacle, just a complete spectacle. And LSU, as a top 10 team, loses. Weird game. Texas A&M, strong way to finish out the season, beating LSU for the first time since joining the conference.
Yep.
And certainly an up and down game everywhere. And my favorite thing about this game was, wow, 7 overtimes. The stats must be crazy.
And then you look and they're like, not really.
Kellen Mond threw for another worldly 287 yards. And Joe Burrow through the air goes for 270. It was, that's the kind of game it was.
I look forward to the offseason chatter about LSU's offense and this 72-point loss skewing their points per game.
Yeah, it definitely does. You have to take this in regular season pointage for LSU in the offseason.
All right. Let's go around the SEC and talk about a few other games here. We had Florida winning the Sunshine Showdown 41-14.
Yes.
Had 536 yards. Felipe Franks had a pretty good game. Florida State, 3 turnovers, 1 for 14 on third downs. At long last, the nightmare season concludes at 5-7. Florida finishes 9-3. So not a bad year for Dan Mullen in year 1.
No, Felipe Franks had a very nice day. They ran the ball super well. They made plays all over the place, especially up front on defense. Forced a ton of mistakes from the Noles, and nice first year for Florida. It's not much to take away from that. I don't love the Gators, but they maximize themselves.
All right, let's go around the other 4 games in the SEC very quickly. Kentucky wins 56-10. They finish out 9-3. We had Mississippi State winning the Egg Bowl 35-3. They finish up at 8-4. Ole Miss 5-7.
Yes.
Vanderbilt 38, Tennessee 13. Nice game for Kyle Shermer here. Vandy wins their 6th game as well. They qualify for bowl as Tennessee falls to 5-7, just missing bowl eligibility, but I think a good second half for the Vols. And finally, Missouri wins 38-0 over Arkansas. They finish up 8-4. Arkansas 2-10. Dan.
Yeah, pretty nice year for Mizzou, all things considered. I believe Vandy players in their 4th year with the Doors are now 3-1 against Tennessee.
That's correct.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Believe I had this as a lock. Bet against Louisville, even though Bobby Petrino's not there. #Betrino. Louisville finishes 1-11 against the spread. Kentucky, with a pretty inept offense, wins by 46.
All right, let's move over to the Big Ten quickly. Penn State 38, Maryland 3. Dan, there's something I need to address here as we talk about Maryland.
I'm ready.
I said on the last show, erroneously, that Maryland running back Anthony McFarland was the son of one Booger McFarland.
Right.
I thought he was. I read an article. I was pointed in the direction of some conflicting information. Turns out I was wrong. But I want to read to you the way that this is phrased in this article, if I could.
I read the same thing. I'm curious to see how you defend this.
Anthony McFarland Jr. knows that Alabama has 2 running backs committed. This is, by the way, when he was being recruited.
Correct, yeah.
Including the top player in the country, Najee Harris. But the 4-star recruit from Hyattsville, Maryland, and not the son of former LSU lineman Anthony Booger McFarland, has the Crimson Tide as his top school and isn't shying away from competition. Now, obviously, he went to Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
The way that that's worded implies that everyone named Anthony McFarland may be related to Booger, Dan.
I could see interpreting that as, this 4-star recruit and not the son of Booger McFarland. Like, let's not define him by who his father is. Let's define him by his own merits. I could see you interpreting it like that. But when you actually see it written in front of you, you're like, all right, he is. I can understand the confusion with a really good football player from the South, but unfortunately, with the same name, they are not related. So Snot Rocket is no longer in play here for Anthony McFarland, nickname wise. And he also ran for 12 yards.
He ran for 12 yards, but this article would imply that everyone with the last name McFarland, we need to specify that they are not related to Booger. Maybe they are.
Okay. So what did you think of this game? I didn't watch much of it.
Trace McSorley goes out with a win.
Yeah.
It was nice to see a legend, absolute legend in Penn State history. 9-3 season, though a bit disappointing, is not at all bad. Ricky Slade was out there getting some work. Had some, 2 touchdowns. The front 7 for Penn State has had an amazing year. They produced 43 sacks on the season. They're still very young. They're going to be incredible to watch in 2019 and beyond. So I think that's the building block for the new Penn State post Trace McSorley. They're young across the board, too. They bring a ton of skill position talent back. So I'm excited about where this team goes in the future. Although they're going to have to figure something out beyond Trace McSorley, whether it's Tommy Stevens or someone else. That will be the big question headed into next season. I thought, though, 38-3 to close it out strong the way they did. They're going to get a good bowl game here. Mm-hmm. A really good way to cap off the season. Maryland finishes, 5-7. It's been an up and down year for the Terps. There's been a lot going on beyond the football field, so they're going to have to make a decision on Matt Canada and where they want to go with that program moving forward. I think I read Mike Loxley might be in the hunt for that job. He's a name that keeps coming up. I saw Ken Niumatalolo again being mentioned by some as a potential for Maryland, but certainly they've got some decisions to make.
Justin Shorter didn't really play this year, did he? For Penn State, number 1 receiver in the country coming in, so his red shirt should be intact. So future looks to be pretty bright if everybody can hold on to balls more often than they did this season. Where does Trace McSorley, to you, as a Penn State fan, somebody who's followed PSU throughout the years, where does Trace McSorley rank to you among your favorite Penn State quarterbacks?
Favorite Penn State quarterbacks?
Yeah, so notable.
Wow.
So you got Michael Robinson, Kerry Collins, Matt McGloin, obviously.
Right.
Christian Hackenberg, at least his freshman year. Where does Trace McSorley rank is he a 3-year starter?
Yeah, it's tough to put him above Matt Seneca and Zach Mills, but...
have to.
Yeah, first off, they're running a much different system now than they did for the majority of my life.
I'm not saying best. I'm saying your favorite.
I'm my long-winded point is he's probably my favorite.
Okay.
Because the style of offense that they run now in this new post-Paterno era is a lot more fun than the 3 yards and a cloud of dust-ish kind of offense that they ran more in the Paterno era. So the quarterback's more active, more mobile. Trace McSorley was the perfect quarterback for that system, and he's been a lot of fun to watch. So, yeah, probably my favorite Penn State quarterback in my lifetime.
Even more than your guy, Anthony Morelli?
Even more than my guy Anthony Morelli, yeah.
Former San Jose SaberCat, as I pull up Wikipedia, and Milwaukee Iron.
Man,
Anthony Morelli.
he was a dud.
Yeah, well.
Iowa 31, Nebraska 28. Miguel Recinos drove.
Oh my God, love Miguel.
A 41-yard field goal through the elements in the driving rain, also through the uprights. As time expired, gives Iowa the Heroes Trophy. Iowa tried their best. They tried their level best to lose this game. They blew a 15-point lead in the second half, but ultimately they get the W as time expires. Nice game from Mekhi Sargent, 173 and a touchdown on the ground for Iowa. Also, really nice game for Adrian Martinez, 260 through the air, 76 on the ground, 3 total touchdowns, a nice building block. Clearly, the Nebraska offense moving forward is going to be built around him. They finish up at 4-8, the Cornhuskers, but I thought improved drastically after Amart came back from his injury. And on the flip side, you've got Iowa very quietly.
Amart? Are we going Amart?
Trying.
Do people do that, or is this just a Ty thing?
Just rolled off the tongue.
You tried to slip that in there like I wasn't going to respond to Amart. I'm mixed on it, Ty, if you want to know. Speaking of a wait for it defense with Oklahoma, a nice little wait for it rushing attack for Iowa.
That's right. That's
waiting until Illinois and Nebraska to finish out the year to do anything on the ground. But Mekhi Sargent, yes, definitely was a sort of out of nowhere, at least for me, revelation for the Hawkeyes. And Miguel Recinos, I looked this up because he came into the year as, a known commodity as a very good kicker, and he had a good year. You know how many kicks between 40 and 49 yards he missed this season? 0.0. Hell yeah, Iowa.
Hell
Stay
yeah,
on brand.
Iowa. They win.
Yeah.
Purdue wins the old Oaken Bucket, 28-21. Rondale Moore is going to be a fun story to watch moving forward. Whether or not they've got Jeff Brom next year, he said Purdue's the place he wants to be. We'll see if that changes.
Encouraging.
See if that changes anytime soon. But Rondale Moore in that offense could be a ton of fun. He scored twice. He tied a school record, by the way, with his 7th 100-yard game of the season. He is a true freshman, mind you, so keep your eyes peeled for him. Purdue will go to a bowl. They won their 6th game yesterday. And will qualify. Indiana also had a shot at it, and I thought showed some promise offensively this season, but ultimately 5-7 is your final mark for them.
Your Hoosiers, Ty.
My Hoosiers, yeah.
Bit of a bummer not getting to bowl eligibility, but cool story for Purdue once again. After a slow start, including a loss to EMU, getting to bowl eligibility, beating Ohio State down, which looks more impressive. Coming close to beating Wisconsin and winning the old Oaken Bucket is never a bad time. Cool stories off the field with Trent Tyler, and he was holding the old Oaken Bucket trophy. And I believe they played in a super entertaining bowl game last year against Arizona. They did, because I saw them at Alcatraz. I forgot. I took a tour of Alcatraz with Arizona and Purdue. So hopefully they give us some more entertainment this postseason. David Blau finishes his career pretty successfully.
Minnesota 37, Wisconsin 15. Minnesota taking back the axe. They break a 14-game losing streak. They held the ball for 21 minutes after halftime and forced 2 Wisconsin turnovers over the final 5 minutes. A big win here for PJ Fleck as Minnesota gets bowl eligible. Also of note on the Wisconsin side, Alex Hornibrook came back for the season finale and promptly threw 3 interceptions.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was not a great day for this Wisconsin offense at all. Jonathan Taylor is going to be the forever bright spot, but a major step backwards. A lot of that has to do with injuries on both sides of the ball for the Badgers, but everybody deals with injuries. And some teams deal with a terrible defensive coordinator like Minnesota and make a change after giving up 55 to Illinois in a loss. And their last 3 games, Minnesota gives up 10, 24, and 15. That's a good change. So cool to see the Gophers get to a bowl and improve. It's PJ Fleck's first bowl with Minnesota.
And finally, Michigan State 14, Rutgers 10. Hope you didn't watch this game because
I did watch the fourth quarter.
Rocky Lombardi had to throw it 43 times for Michigan State. Didn't complete a whole lot of them, but Michigan State ultimately wins. They finish up 7-5. Rutgers probably moving on from Chris Ash as they finish 1-11.
Yeah, Michigan State needs to move on from whoever was running this offense, Dan Warner, whatever. This was a nightmare of an offensive season for Michigan State, given what they were returning on offense. Rocky Lombardi was a bright spot at times, and it's, Michigan State just did its own defense a pretty large disservice this fall.
All right, we got to move quick through the Big 12, Pac-12, and ACC. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Baylor 35, Texas Tech 24. Baylor very quietly gets to 6-6. They were 1-11 last year, but Matt Rule getting stuff figured out as Baylor going back to a bowl game. Cliff Kingsbury, by the way, on the Texas Tech side, it's his 6th season in Lubbock. He's only had 2 winning seasons, once in the first year, the other in 2015. Now a tough season for him with that revolving door at quarterback. It seems as though there's a lot of speculation, a lot of smoke that they are going to move on from Cliff Kingsbury and be looking for a new coach.
Yeah, tough to fully blame him this year with the quarterback injuries, but even you can't lose. This game wasn't nearly as bad as the Kansas State game. And I saw a report out of, I want to say, a news outlet from San Antonio, but as of this recording, and he definitely is on that line of why haven't we seen consistent bowl eligibility improvement kind of thing.
Yep.
So perhaps by the time you listen to this, he will no longer have a job in Lubbock. We shall see.
Iowa State 42, Kansas State 38. Iowa State came from 17 back.
Yeah, they did.
In the fourth quarter to win this one. K-State finishes up 5-7. It's their worst year since Bill Snyder came back in 2009. Also, a lot of speculation that he is going to retire after the season and that they'll be looking for a football coach as well. But Iowa State, right now at 7-4, they've got a game against Drake next week, which should mean an 8-4 season for the Cyclones. Another good one for Matt Campbell.
Absolutely. And yeah, the comeback was very nice, needing 3 touchdowns to close this one out, and a pretty nice day for Brock Purdy. Hakeem Butler just continues to astound the world. One of the better wide receivers in college football, and cool for Iowa State to get. By the way, yeah, you mentioned the Drake thing. Such a bummer that we couldn't get an incarnate word bonus game after their FCS playoff loss.
TCU 31. Oklahoma State 24. Somehow both teams finished 6-6. I will never understand this, but 6-6 for both teams.
Well, TCU finished the season with 7 healthy players, is what it felt like. But Jalen Reagor was at least close to one of them, and that's a wonderful thing. He is an explosive player. He finished the season out in typical dude fashion for him. Oklahoma State just maddeningly inconsistent. They go into the fourth quarter. I didn't watch much of this game. Just a very flat day on offense for the Cowboys, and with what they've accomplished lately, and with how I talked up Mike Gundy as one of the best Big 12 coaches, which I think is still true, disappointing year for the Pokes.
All right, I'm going to rifle through.
Keep rifling.
The other 4 Pac-12 games. And give me a little flavor here, Dan.
I'll give you some flav.
Stanford 49, UCLA 42. Stanford plays Cal next week to move to 8-4. UCLA finishes up 3-9, though they did improve a lot in the second half of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Cal 33, Colorado 21. Cal with an ultra quiet chance at 8 wins if they were to knock off Stanford next week. Colorado, obviously, you saw the news. We talked about the news. They fired Mike McIntyre. They finish up 5-7. Again, your final here, 33-21 in favor of Cal. We had ASU winning the Territorial Cup, 41-40 over Arizona. Nice year, I guess, for Arizona State in year 1 of the Herm Edwards era. They left some on the table, but they finish at 7-5. Arizona, meanwhile, in Kevin Sumlin's first year, they finish up at 5-7. And finally, your Oregon Ducks win 55-15 in the Civil War over the Oregon State Beavers. Oregon finishes up at 8-4. Oregon State 2-10, but they did show, I thought, substantial improvement for the vast majority of this football season.
Yeah, the only thing I'll give you about those games, Arizona State, a nice comeback win. They needed all of that fourth quarter, and they held on against Arizona. So a nice year for Arizona State, particularly on offense with, I guess you could point to the emergence of Eno Benjamin for the Sun Devils. So they're going bowling. Arizona started the year too slow to ultimately pull something out and get to a bowl. Cal outscores its own offense with its defense in the first 2 minutes, touchdown-wise. They score one offensive touchdown, and they get 2 pick sixes in the first 2 minutes of this game. That is the ultimate 2018 Cal thing in a victory. But good for Cal. You were high on them early on. Not because you were high on Chase Garbers, but they nonetheless justify your love. UCLA was in the game against Stanford late. Good to see a healthy Bryce Love for Stanford. UCLA just ended up shooting itself in its own foot a couple of times, losing the shootout, fumbling late, and giving this game away. Oregon did what it needed to do against Oregon State. They did not overcomplicate things. They ran it and ran it and ran it some more. The only real big takeaway from this game, Justin Herbert hurt his shoulder. I don't believe people feel it's a very serious sort of broken collarbone situation like he had last season. It looks like Oregon has a good chance to go to, I think, the Holiday Bowl, which, again, is the big win if you are a Pac-12 fan. Get to San Diego in late December. I believe that's when it's being played. But hope Justin Herbert is all right. I don't know if they're going to take chances with him in the bowl game with his future, either with Oregon or with the NFL. But Oregon finishes 8-4, and they very, very much could have finished 9-3 or beyond. But ultimately, too many mistakes, too many errors, too much stubbornness on offense stood in the way.
Let's move over to the ACC. 4 games to get through here quickly. Syracuse 42, Boston College 21. The Cuse caps off a 9-3 season, a really nice game for grungy Eric Dungey, who accounted, get this, for 6 of Syracuse's 7 touchdowns. He had 3 through the air, 3 on the ground. The Syracuse defense forcing 4 turnovers from Boston College. A nice year for Dino Babers. Boston College also bowl eligible. They finish up their year at 7-5.
Syracuse is going to finish the season as a top 20 team.
Yep. Not bad, right?
That is incredible. Eric Dungey is a Syracuse football legend, period. That's it. He was incredible. He was our 4-year starter, leads them to a top 20 finish. Unreal. Love it.
Virginia Tech 34, Virginia 31 in overtime. A wild game with Hail Marys and fumbles, and Bryce Perkins had 250 through the air, 100 on the ground. Virginia Tech, though, keeps their winning streak alive over Virginia. They play Marshall next week. They need that win over Marshall to get to 6-6. UVA will be going to a bowl game, kind of going out in a sour note here, but they finish up 7-5, which is still a pretty good year for the Hoos.
Yeah, Virginia consistently going to a bowl is a win. If that's the world we live in, that's a win for the Hoos. And crazy ending of the game, you left out one key element of the game. That, of course, is Adam Amin on the call.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which, of course, an Adam Amin game is going to get bonkers. So shout out Trey Turner, does he play shortstop for the Nats?
Yes.
That's what position he plays?
Yes.
Other Trey Turner plays for the Nats, because the Trey Turner is playing for the Hokies, has a huge game both in special teams and through the air catching balls. He is a big bright spot for a Virginia Tech team that had some lowlights this year.
NC State 34, UNC 28, another game that went to overtime. Reggie Gillespie for NC State had 5 rushing touchdowns. NC State actually could get to 9-3 on the year. They play ECU next week. They're currently 8-3. Carolina, meanwhile, finishes up 2-9. They're not even playing a game next week. They're just calling it quits. They're probably going to move on from Larry Fedora. It's been a really bad year in Chapel Hill. So curious to see the new direction of UNC after we get through the coaching carousel.
Yes. So North Carolina, I thought did play with some fire this year. They just came up a little bit short. When I say play with fire, I don't mean treading dangerously. I mean, they fought with some guts, whatever. And if there's anything about these last couple of years of North Carolina football where they have dealt with a number of injury issues and quarterback issues, it's, hey, maybe Seth Luttrell is really good at what he does. Yeah. Hey, maybe if you're a team in the Big 12 and you're looking to win more games than you have lately, maybe figure out what Seth Luttrell's phone number is and see what's going on with him. So yeah, NC State, a nice win. Reggie Gillespie, you're right, with a dominant game. Wake Forest, Ty.
A good story here. So Wake wins 59-7 over Duke. Wake has been decimated by injuries all year, but clearly we talk about de facto national championships.
Yes.
Bowl eligibility here for Wake may have been their de facto national championship game against Duke. They win by 52 to get win number 6 and go to a bowl. Good for them.
Led by possible EA Sports NCAA football name-generated running back Cade Carney. He goes over 200, does a great job. A really nice win for Wake Forest.
The only other game that I have here, notably, it's top 10 game. UCF wins 38-10 over USF. The war on I-4 goes again to UCF, but again, it's all tempered by the fact that Mackenzie Milton is out for a significant period of time, had the really bad knee injury. ESPN wouldn't even show the replay. It was that bad.
Yeah.
His father pointed out that he had surgery. He's recovering now. But I think this effectively kills UCF's playoff chances. It was always a bit of a long shot, mind you.
Sure.
But now that he's out, it really does force you to look at things in a different light. So a great year for UCF, again, undefeated. Unfortunately, now it just comes at a very, very high cost with Milton going down.
Yeah, so they advanced to the American Championship game. I have not watched the play. I read about what happened to his leg.
It's pretty bad.
It is brutal to hear because of his career being as good as it's been thus far. And I guess good for UCF for playing through, that kind of distraction and taking down a USF team that's been pretty down. But we'll see what UCF can do. It's not nothing to go 12-0 as an FBS team, which they can, winning the American. I believe they take on Memphis, who took down Houston, who obviously dealt with their own quarterback injury a couple weeks ago.
So there you have it. That's all I have. Do you have any others?
Do I have any others, Ty? James Madison, comfortable win over Delaware, setting up a showdown against Colgate this coming week. Right?
Yeah.
That's significant, Ty.
Yeah. I was trying not to get too taken emotionally.
Yeah, I would also point out Boise State played really, really well ultimately against a Utah State offense that has been exceptional this season, and Boise State clinches, I believe, the Mountain Division and moves on to take on Fresno State in the Mountain West Championship game. So Madison Avenue really comes through in a big way. Buffalo clinches their side of the MAC, and they move on to the MAC Championship game. Ohio, a nice win, even without much of Nathan Rourke through the air over Akron, and they get to 8 wins. Eastern Michigan is not a terrible program. I mean, this is nothing new, but just that they are going to a bowl once again is pretty significant. By the way, the Buffalo coach is Lance Leopold, who is I want to say D3, he was Wisconsin Whitewater, 3-time national champion coach. So doing really impressive things at a place where it's pretty difficult to win in Buffalo, as we all, I know, pretty much should know by now. Elsewhere, I think San Diego State lost to Hawaii, which Hawaii goes 8-5. And this was looking like it could have been a disaster year for the Warriors. And they pull out a win over San Diego State in overtime and will advance to a bowl game. So, Nick Rolovich has done a quietly pretty remarkable job way, way out in the middle of the ocean. North Texas goes to 9-3. We mentioned Seth Luttrell taking this program from a 1-11 program to consecutive 9-win seasons at least. Has been pretty impressive to say the least. Fresno State easily gets by San Jose State. Charlotte, who fired their coach, gets by FAU. Lane Kiffin will not be going to a bowl game this year. Arkansas State bounces. I know. Arkansas State bouncing back from a pretty slow start. They finish 8-4. Temple, slow start. It's UConn. They put it on UConn. I believe Randy Edsel gets some sort of bonus. I am not making that up. UConn goes 1-11. He gets some bonus. Tulsa, it's a nice win over SMU. They have been bad this year. SMU showed some promise during the middle of the season and we're in it for the division. We get a rematch between UAB and Middle Tennessee. UAB was very bad, but Spencer Brown has been beat up and he didn't really go, and he has been their biggest offensive weapon. So it's a rematch back at Middle Tennessee this coming I want to say it's before Saturday, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll look it up. Otherwise, I mean, the App State win over Troy is significant. That was a play-in game for the Sun Belt Conference Championship. Georgia Southern figures out a way to finish the season pretty strongly. They go 9-3, a nice bounce back after a couple down years. And I think that's it. Navy, God, 3-9. What happened? They lose by 1 to Tulane. And Western Kentucky, your boy, Mike Sanford.
Yeah.
Has had opportunity. Like, they may be better than 3-9. Beating a pretty decent Louisiana Tech team is an accomplishment. They probably should have won a couple more. I think they lost to Maine early on. Marshall gets to 8 wins, which is nice. They beat FIU, a pretty decent FIU team. And now I am officially done reviewing everything.
Dan, we need dudes. Who are our dudes for week
I only have 13? A few, but DJ Dallas, Chris Olave, out of nowhere, really significant for Ohio State. We're trying to name unobvious, Reggie Gillespie, you mentioned, Kendrick Rogers. He makes difficult catches. Trey Turner was impressive. Everything about West Virginia and Oklahoma's offense was amazing, but cool to see Hollywood Brown in front of his cousin, Antonio Brown, which, yes, Ty, can confirm they are related.
Thank you.
I would say most of Notre Dame's defense, but Drew Tranquill is just, he remains the dude each and every week. Alabama, it's Tua. It's Tua. That's it. Nico Collins, I thought, made some good catches for Michigan, but hard to give out too many dudes there. Myles Gaskin for 4 years of 1,000 yards. Way to big send off for the running back. Dealt with some injury issues this year. Eric Dungey, how do you not dudify Eric Dungey? Cade Carney for having what I believe to be a made up name for Wake Forest. And listen, it wasn't a this week specific thing, but Mackenzie Milton is just a dude, and we hope he comes back stronger than ever whenever it is that happens.
Dan, I want to close out by giving myself a dude alert if I could.
Oh, hit me.
So we've got a gentleman by the name of Charles who listens to the show, told us he spends a lot of time on airplanes traveling for business. He's also really into data. And he has sent us, I don't know if you've got it in front of you, a Google Doc with a rather robust chart of all of our picks by conference throughout the course of the year. First and foremost, I am up by 4% on you.
Look at you.
Overall, 54.2% on the year picking games versus your 50.2%. So we're both in the black here, which is good.
Right.
Do you know, or would you care to venture a guess on your most successful conference as it relates to picking against a point spread?
So I would think Pac-12, the conference I'm most familiar with, but I think I did see this and that I am not a Pac-12 as much of an expert as I'd like to think I am.
You're not. Well, no. In fairness, you're not as big of an expert as I am. I was 70% in the Pac-12 this year. You were only 56%.
I'm going to say, where am I strong? I'm going to say ACC.
You were worst in the ACC. No, excuse me. You're only, No, I'm right. I'm sorry. 44% in the ACC. I was 40% in the ACC. Neither one of us did all that well. You were best in the Big 12, 57%.
Okay.
57%. So we still got another week of games here. Things I suppose could go horribly south for me, but you pretty much have to run the table and hope for me to have a total wipeout.
Yeah, we'll do double nothing for the Bulls Conference Championship.
Sounds
I feel good about this. Officially, Larry Fedora has been let go.
Okay.
By North Carolina, something we talked about it looked to be a pretty strong possibility, but North Carolina, I did see a story swirling that they might have Mac Brown interest.
Okay.
Which
you
could do. Why don't you just hire Scott Satterfield if he'll listen and take your money? I think that makes the most sense, but you know how I feel about App State, and you are anti-Boone, which, listen, we all have that perspective. So North Carolina officially opens a tricky situation with where they've been with academic inquiries, but still I believe to be a pretty good job with the ACC looking like there's room to grow.
There is room to grow. All right. Well, that does it for week 13. Now in the books, when we next speak to you on Wednesday, we'll be previewing all these conference championship games, as well as some of the final regular season matchups that we have for one reason or another. Don't forget to email us, solidverbal@gmail.com. Check the website, solidverbal.com. Find us all across social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, all the usual hotspots. And if you haven't already, it's been a long season, but if you haven't told a friend yet about the Solid Verbal, we would very much appreciate that. Tell a friend to come and check us out. Or if you've already done it and you're looking for some other way to contribute, going out to iTunes and leave us a review.
This season kind of flew by. Sometimes like around week 9 or 10, I'm like, geez, we still have 3-4 more weeks.
I know. Me too. I go into like a deep, dark depression.
I didn't really have that this year.
No.
It flew by for me.
Me too. Well, we've got more ahead for sure. We'll have fun on Wednesday talking all things through in relation to games and firings and who knows, maybe hirings for that guy, Dan Rubenstein over there in New York City. For myself, Ty Hildebrandt over here in Eastern Pennsylvania. Thanks again for tuning into the Solid Verbal. Catch you all in a few days. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.